Hello, everyone. Welcome. This video will be a guest speaking interview with a good friend of mine, Honora Gathings. She worked as a journalist in multimedia formats for over 18 years, and then recently became a PR professional. She currently works as the Director of Communication for Independent Presbyterian Church. Hey, Honora, how are you doing today?
I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for inviting me to come talk to everybody.
Absolutely. Well, as I told you, this class is geared towards media writing and how to work as a media professional. So you have a large range of experience. Today, we're going to be focusing primarily on your PR background right now. So tell my students a little bit about the world of public relations and what you do.
So I am currently the Director of Communications for Independent Presbyterian Church, which is a church of around 2,000 people. We also have a foundation and we have several outreach ministries. So I do, typically when you work for a nonprofit, like a church or another organization, you are doing everything. You are the entire communications department. So I do all internal and external communications for the church, which means I do newsletters that go out electronically and both mailed to all of our members. I also compile our annual reports, which I know that does not sound exciting, but there is a big storytelling aspect to those. I handle all of our social media. I handle all of our PR requests whenever a television station or a newspaper calls. I help them get in touch with the right people, get them the right information. I also write and send out news releases to all of those media outlets as well. I am in charge of our website. So I recently, a few years ago, redesigned and launched a new website for the church. Last year, I launched a new website for our foundation. I'm also in charge of all of our branding. So I was responsible for getting a new logo and making sure it was applied consistently. So that's just kind of an overview of what I do. I do a little bit of everything. I also shoot videos. I also take pictures. Sometimes I help organize events. The thing that I think you'll find working in PRs, just like working in news, is that you've got to be adaptable and being willing to do any kind of job or task that's thrown your way. And when you look at communications as a whole, everything kind of in some ways is connected to communications.
Well, that's a great jumping off point for my next question, which is what are the skills that can help these students be adaptable? What are some of the key things that they should be focusing on now so that they can really excel in their career in the future?
Number one is writing. You have to be a strong writer. It doesn't matter if you want to be a spokesperson for a company, if you want to write for a publication, it really doesn't matter what you do. You have to be a strong writer. So go ahead, pick up your AP style book and get very familiar with it. I still to this day, I mean, I've been working in PR and news at this point for 20 years. This makes me sound so old, 20 years, but I still carry around an AP style book. Whenever I get an intern or I get a new person on staff, I hand them a copy of that AP style book. I mean, that is your Bible when it comes to working in PR. So learn to write really well, because I have found, that's just a key skill. Whenever you go to apply for a job, whenever you go to apply for an internship, and I learned this the hard way. If you have one misspelled word, one comma out of line, I mean, your resume automatically gets kicked. I mean, it's in the garbage can because there's just so much competition in this field for the jobs that exist. So number one, writing. Number two, I think grit. You've got to be able to have a clear understanding of who you are and be able to accept rejection. I hate to say that, but it is such a competitive industry. Even when you have a job, when you're approaching a news outlet wanting to get a story published, you're going to get no's. You need to be able to pick yourself up after you face that kind of rejection. You'll also get rejection just in terms of criticism. Not everyone's going to like your story. Not everyone's going to like your news release. If you end up becoming a media spokesperson, someone may not like what you say. Someone may not like a social media post. And you're talking to a much broader audience than you are right now as a student, because it's not just your friends and families that are following you on social media. I mean, it's entire communities that have a really broad spectrum of ideas and thoughts and beliefs. So, just tenacity and the ability to just say, okay, this is a setback. This is an obstacle. Or as I like to look at it as, this is a challenge, so what can I do to make myself better, to overcome this, and what can I learn from this? So I think those are really the two most important things. The third thing I would say is learn everything you possibly can, seize every opportunity. So when I was in school, I had no idea I'd ever go into PR one day. I really thought that I wanted to be a network anchor. One of my first jobs out of college was for Good Morning America, and I always wanted to come back and be an anchor for Good Morning America. And so when I went to school, I could have focused more on the reporting, the talent track. And back then, one-man bands did not exist. Like, reporters had photographers. It was an entirely different world. But I had the foresight to take the opportunity to learn how to shoot, to learn how to edit, to learn how to put together radio stories. I know that sounds crazy, but I learned how to put radio stories together. I ended up becoming the editor of our graduate publication in grad school. I was the first broadcast student to do that. And I am so, so happy I did those things, because all along the way in my career, I have run into situations where my entire day, my entire assignment could have collapsed if I didn't have those skills. And when I was going from one job to another, it gave me that extra skill set to put me above the other applicants and to really make me stand out. So seize opportunities.
And students, I promise I didn't pay her to promote the AP style book. I really didn't. It is a skill you actually made.
No, she did. I promise.
I know that they hate our AP lessons, but it's going back to those basic foundational writing skills that you talk about that are so necessary along the way. Now, I love that you talk about having to be adaptable, wanting to seize opportunities, because you really never know what you're going to come in contact with in PR. So tell me a little bit about how your day-to-day kind of looks. What is your schedule like? I know each day is unique and different, but talk a little bit about how you manage that flexibility and those various responsibilities that a PR professional needs to have.
So I think day to day, and again, this is coming from someone who worked in the news world, which the news world is, you really don't know what your day is going to unfold. You don't know if you're going to be sleeping in your bed at home that night, which I know sounds crazy. So for me, the PR world is very, for the most part, predictable. I think that there's much more of a pattern of how your day unfolds. And so for me, my day begins like so many other professionals with first checking my voicemails, checking my phone calls, and kind of prioritizing like what needs to be tackled first. Like if we have a communication system that's not functioning correctly, or we have something that was sent out to like a media outlet and we've had a reporter call. I mean, those are my top priorities. If we ever put something out there, and this will happen, we put some information out there and then it needs to get corrected for some reason. Working in the nonprofit sector, you have a lot of people with different skill sets. And I feel like sometimes people are not as good with setting hard deadlines and sticking with deadlines. So there's so many times that I send out information about event, and as soon as the information goes out, as soon as I send something to the printer, suddenly the date has changed or the time has changed. So it's getting to those things first in the morning. So once I get through that, then I schedule all of our social media posts on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook for the day. If I'm having a really good week, I can schedule for the entire week on a Monday, but that generally doesn't happen because there's just so many moving pieces and so many different parts. And, you'll find as your week unfolds, you'll have more information coming to your desk about events that you want to promote, or little stories or tidbits about things going on. So I start with social media. If I have to do any website updates, then I'll go ahead and do it in the morning. And then I usually have my meetings. I've got morning meetings every meeting, whether it's all staff meetings or whether it's meetings with different staff members about big projects that they have coming down the pipeline, and figuring out how I can this. Like, what do they need from me? Do they need flyers? Do they need brochures? Do we need to send out a news release? Do we need to put something on the website, social media? So we look at the whole, all of the tools that we have in our arsenal for communicating information. And then once I have that, then I go ahead and I sit down and I kind of timeline the whole project out. I have this weird, crazy calendar system, but I have multiple calendars. I have a working calendar, and then I have a calendar that's more project based with firm dates. And so I put everything on my calendar and I spend some time reviewing my calendar. And then afternoons are generally my big project times. Those are the times that I sit down and if I have a news release that needs to go out for an event that's happening a few months from now, I'll sit down and do that. I'll sit down and I'll write stories for our website. I'll write stories for our print publications. I'll start assembling our print publications. I will, I'll edit some video projects. So it's just really what's going on. And then the thing I do at the very end of the day, and I highly recommend this. I mean, even as a student, before you end your day, just take 5 minutes to clean up your workspace, but more importantly, to come up with your to-do list for the next day. Like, go ahead and sit down and look at your calendar. And I always look to see, how my meetings are stacked up. I'm also involved in outside agencies too. So I look to see what my commitments are there. And I go ahead and I write my to-do list for the next day, so that when I show up at work the next day, I have this list of things, of action items to do. And I don't have to sit there thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like, where did I leave off? What do I need to do today? So that's how a typical day unfolds, with the exception of all the surprises. And, of course, with every business, you'll get people with last minute requests or coming into your office for what they deem as an emergency. Sometimes, unfortunately, I have a lot of people that will tell me about an event that's happening in 24 hours that we need to do a PR push for, that we need to make people aware of. So in those situations, obviously I stop what I'm doing, all hands on deck. I start pulling in additional help to get it done. So that's a typical day.
So I'm hearing a lot of organization, and I highly recommend that. Here's my to-do list
Yes.
that I've been working on. So yeah, I mean, PR is a lot about organization. It's a lot about planning, because you're dealing with a lot of things coming at you at once. So key skills to really be thinking about. Absolutely. So, talk to me a little bit. I hear so much of what you're talking about involving writing and storytelling. Tell me how you kind of utilize your background in news and storytelling from that aspect to help you be successful, rather, as a PR professional.
So I always go back to, what is the why? The why. I think asking yourself why is an important question. I know you're thinking, what are you talking about? Asking the why is this important? That's something that we learned early on in journalism, when we were considering, as a journalist, typically journalists start the morning in a big editorial meeting and they throw out different ideas. And you usually have your editor, your news director standing there asking, well, why? Like, why is this important? Like, why do our viewers care? And that is something so important to have in the back of your mind when you're sitting down and writing everything. If you cannot explain the why behind an event, behind a story, behind any information that you're pushing, then you have no message. You are not going to get any kind of response or any kind of traction. So I always start and look at the why of something, like, why are we inviting people out to a community garden ribbon cutting event? And being able to tell the story is so important. You begin with the why, and then you want to get people invested emotionally in this. You want to pull at their heartstrings as it, you can. I mean, you really want them to see the impact, the good, the reason why that they should stop whatever they're doing and spend time working on your story. And so I do spend a lot of time crafting stories. My news releases kind of have more of a storytelling aspect to them. Because if you can get to the point of getting people to invest emotionally in something, then you have a much greater chance of them acting on it. So, the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why are important. So the why is there. But I like putting the very basics at the very top of any kind of news release, because you need to know, people need to know, news editors want to know very quickly, what folder am I putting this in? Because they've got a folder for every single day. And they want to know, am I putting this on Wednesday folder? Am I putting this on Friday folder? Is this week? Is this next week? So you got to know the when, the who's involved. But the news releases that just have a very sterile, I've seen news releases that have the information broken down like what, who, what, where, and when, and then the information. And then this very, sterile generalization of city councilors will be gathering to have a ribbon cutting on a community garden in Rushton Park. Okay, why do I care? But when I sent this news release out about a community garden that our church was sponsoring right across from our property, I talked a lot about the benefit. The fact that Birmingham is a food desert, that access to fresh vegetables is hard to come by, that a lot of kids don't understand, where vegetables come from. They think they just magically appear in the grocery store, that most of the people in that community do not have access to backyards, so they can't grow their own produce, that, gardening is a form of exercise. And, studies have shown that when you put community gardens in city parks, people really invest in these parks. They're less likely to have vandalism. People tend to use them more. So those were the things that I really stressed in the news release, and I put up at the top after the who, what, when, where, and why. So being able to tell that story is so important. As a PR professional, you're not just writing news releases. You're often writing speeches for people. You're ghost writing blogs for people. You're writing blogs yourself. You're writing stories for newsletters. And I find the best PR professionals I know are, one, PR professionals that know how to write. If you don't know, again, I hate to say it, but find a way to love writing. If you don't like writing, if you, it's okay if you struggle with it, because this is a skill and you can learn it. But if you don't like writing, if you absolutely hate writing, I would really encourage you to start looking at other possible career choices, because you've got to know how to write, and you've got to be able to write in different formats for different voices. And, what I'm finding more and more is that sometimes a very well-written press release will show up verbatim on a news agency's website. And so you've got to know how to write and tell stories.
Yeah, and I really like that you talk about hitting those motive appeals too, why does a person care? Well, maybe they care because it's a food desert. Maybe they care because of crime. So really kind of addressing the multiple communities and multiple needs in those communities through your writing. So since you brought up why, let's end our discussion today about why you enjoy your work, why you love PR, specifically nonprofit PR, which of course is its own brand of public relations. Why do you do what you do, and why do you love it?
So for me, it really all started as I look back now and I was like, this is me as a child. So I annoyed my parents all the time as a child. I was all into saving the world. I wanted to save every animal out there. I wanted to make sure that everyone was recycling and reusing their resources. And I got my hands on this book called 50 Things That Kids Can Do to Save the World. And that was kind of like my Bible at the time. I carried around everywhere. I was putting milk cartons in the back of toilets, because when you do, I know that sounds crazy, but when you do that, it lessens the amount of water that goes into the tank. And so you conserve water. And so for me, that was kind of a light bulb moment. And maybe some of you have had your light bulb moment. Some of you may not have, and that's okay, because not everyone has their light bulb moment as a child. Some people have it much later in life. I know I have friends of mine that are still waiting for it to happen. But for me, that was my light bulb moment. That one, I really loved service. I loved helping people, and I loved communicating. I've always been a bit of a talker. I love writing. I wrote lots of stories as a child. And so when I went about, so I entered journalism because I really foresaw journalism as, the fourth estate, the watchdog. And I really felt that I would have the ability to impact more people by being able to take people to places that they normally wouldn't get to go, to introduce them to people that they normally wouldn't get to meet, to hopefully take them into situations where they were exposed to ideas that were very different from their own, and that, they could explore and better understand the world around them. And I just always have a curiosity for how people tick, why people make the decisions that they make. And so that was just a natural fit for me. Now, over the years, journalism has changed so much drastically. And I feel like a lot of that watchdog element, particularly in local news, is not really there as much. And so I felt like I really wasn't getting to tell the stories that I wanted to tell of how average people can really be heroes. How, it doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take power. It doesn't take elected office to really make real change in your communities. And so I decided when I left news that I wanted to work for a nonprofit, because we have so many incredible nonprofits in Alabama. Alabama is such a caring state, and there's so much good work that's being done and can be done. And I just wanted to share those stories. I wanted to share the stories of all of the volunteers and the work and the mission, but also use it as my voice and my writing skills as a way to educate people about issues in our community. And while some of these issues may seem to be, something that's far away in a faraway galaxy that don't affect our lives, to show people how they do. And so that's my why. That's why I am now in nonprofit communications. And granted, who knows, in another 20 years, but at this point, from where I'm sitting, I love working in nonprofit, and I want to stay in nonprofit. And I think if you have a heart for service, I would highly recommend considering a job in nonprofit. It's a great way to get an internship, because nonprofits, you do have some nonprofits that have a lot of money. You do have a lot that don't have money. And so they're always looking for help. And they're always extremely gracious and supportive of any help that they can get. So if you're looking for a great internship, I encourage everyone to start interning now. If you haven't already, I think my first day of college, I went and got my first internship. And it's just, embrace the learning process.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like you're reiterating everything that I told my students, which I just love to hear, not because it's my voice, but because it will help them. And so I also just love hearing your passion for what you do, for writing, for helping others. And that's really what the heart of PR and the heart of communication is. So thank you so much, Honora. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we will get to see you in person in future semesters as guest speakers. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Hope you are having a great week, and I will see you again soon.